Celtics Stuff Live.
Welcome to Celtics Stuff Live on the CLNS Media Network, the leading online provider of audio and video coverage for the Boston Celtics. John, you and I have not been around since before Labor Day. We took a month off. Usually we take it off in August. I think actually last year I did a little bit of a I don't know what it was exactly, but we interviewed a lot of different people on their careers. So it was kind of like a highlight or a career highlight. This year we took some time, but we took it in September. Well, I should say late August and into September, a little bit later this year either way. And here we are, we're back, and we're just 11 days from the very first preseason game and only a week from media day. It's interesting, the whole preseason schedule. It's very, very different, and it's kind of tight. It's 4 quick games, then they get a week basically, and then all of a sudden the regular season starts. Pretty interesting. 4 days from media day to the first exhibition game. So they did what we wanted them to do. We had them shorten the preseason and give everybody a little bit more rest during the regular season. Of course, the Celtics were so lean last year due to injuries unrelated to fatigue that we never really got to see the benefits of that.
No, we haven't, forget Christmas morning. This is 3 weeks later and we still have the presents unwrapped under the tree. And we're like, okay, all right, when we get to do this now, we want to see the shiny toys that we all had and we were expecting to play with a year ago, and they got ripped out of our hands and stomped in our faces like, Ralphie with the with the Red Ryder BB gun. We got hit in the face,
Kevin Garnett, you got to punch the bully back in the face.
Yeah. Speaking of Kevin Garnett, got punched in the face by his accountant too. That's a whole nother story we didn't cover in the time since we've been gone. But it's everyone's in anticipation of what's going to happen. We're a week away. I'm excited for media day. I'm always excited for media day. I can't wait for the opportunity to, watch the live stream as, partially comatose interviews take place on Celtics.com, streamed to my desktop at work.
Partially comatose.
It's great.
Yeah.
They do a great job at Celtics.com. I'm not trying to hate on them there. I'm just saying the players are they're talking to 15 different outlets. They gotta do all this stuff. It's a tough slog, but I eat it up. I love it. I mean, Celtics basketball is back, and soon we'll be ready for my eyeballs.
Well, I'm pretty sure Trags and Goodman and Nick Gelso are all going to be there representing CLNS Media as well, and we'll get some great videos. I don't know if you noticed, but on the YouTube channel, the high definition is legit high def. I swear they must have gotten some new camera equipment. It's looking really good, like broadcast, high-level broadcast. Media video. I'm just loving what they're doing. I can't wait to see it inside of the practice facility with a bunch of players. And they were there, at the practice facility recently when Gordon Hayward donned what they believe was a Celtics jersey for the very first time since opening night when he suffered that horrific ankle injury. And he basically says he's back 100%, been doing full court for over 90%, I should say, been doing full court for over 2 weeks. And that last 10% to get to 100% is full explosion off of the ankle. I think once he's in games, that's when he'll finally work through that. Do you expect any setbacks, John, in his rehab once it's full court NBA action? Not preseason, but regular season play?
I think they'll ease him into it, though. I think that's the trick, all the orthopedic people and all the sports medicine people of all, the doctors seem to say, look, he should be able to come back fine. Explosiveness is really the issue. And the one thing he talked about when he had that interview, I suppose, the other day, at the New Balance Center is that he felt like, in his 5-on-5, it was really about him feeling in the flow of the game. And that was a really promising thing in my mind. The fact that he's not thinking twice about cuts and whatnot, and he's thinking about trying to get in the flow and feeling that the way that the game comes to you. I thought that was a really encouraging sign. I think that, there's certain things that probably you're gonna have, and you'd probably be better, in a better spot to talk about this in terms of what sort of impact that can have to your legs and, repetitive motion on an injury, on the joint and so forth. But to me, it seems like with this team, they're going to give so much rest to people when they're overworked, and all the amount of money they've thrown to sports medicine and really trying to make this a high-tech operation when it comes to the well-being of the players. It seems to me they're going to err on the side of let's make everyone feel right, be as close to tip-top performance shape in April, May, June, than worrying about regular season. And they've got so many guys in this roster, if you got to pull Gordon Hayward from a night because he's tired, or it's just the scar tissue is breaking there, or whatever it is. You got Marcus Morris you throw in there into his slot, and you juggle the lineups around that way. I mean, they've just got so much depth here. It's not a problem for the team. It's just probably a question for Gordon Hayward, how quickly he can get back to that all-star form.
You make a really good point. They just invested all this money into a training staff that you would think that they would want to get this one right, because it's really a big part of their marketing campaign, even to free agents, et cetera. This is why you want to come to Boston. We have state-of-the-art facilities. We have state-of-the-art training. We've got Tom Brady's trainer. No, they don't. But anyway, all I'm going to say is at the end of the day, this is a big mark for them in that regard. I also think what you're talking about with scar tissue, et cetera, I think that was the setback with the second surgery. I think he's through that. I'm not surprised to hear him say he's ready to kind of be in the flow. I think it's more of a conditioning thing, to be honest with you, at this point. I think he's gotten through those kinds of setbacks. Now, is his ankle weaker? It has to be. You just don't break an ankle and then all of a sudden it's not weaker later. The whole game plan on that is to build the muscles around it. So were he a little fatigued? Were he to have, some, just not being in game shape? Could he end up re-injuring himself in any kind of way just because of the fact that he's not in game shape and maybe the muscles get tired? Sure. But that's a risk for anybody, whether they're in game shape or recovering from any type of injury. I don't think there's really anything special here. Not 100% that I know that, but that's kind of my estimation based on the fact that he did have a second surgery, which I think was meant to clean up the ankle, as you said. Another thing that stood out to me, he's a lot lighter in the lower body. If you remember the very first game last year, he kind of had a little bit more, I would say, of a power forward's body, especially like from a rebounding standpoint, really that lower body weight to be able to push guys around. He's a little bit leaner. No surprise there. He hasn't been able to do lower body work for quite some time. But I almost wonder if the Celtics asked him to beef up heading into last season so they could float him over to the 4 a little bit more easily, especially when he would have to be a rebounder. That might be limited this year because I think he's lost some of that lower body strength. And so in that regard, maybe he's got to play shooting guard, small forward more than we were used to. But I also think heading into last season, they were thinking Jason Tatum was strictly going to play the 3. And I think we've seen Jason actually defensively and also rebounding wise be able to give minutes at the 4. So I don't know if this segues great into our starting lineup debate that began this time last year and never got to be settled. While I won the debate for game 1, that I believed it would be Kyrie and Brown and Tatum and Hayward and Horford, and I still staunchly believe that will be the case. You and I have continued debate over the season of what would have been or should have been or what still will be this very upcoming season. And so I'm still sticking to my guns there, but I do think there's something that maybe says it's a little bit more difficult to start all 5 of them if they're a little bit concerned about it being leaner at the 4.
Yeah. Well, and opening night they're playing Philly, right? So that's the first sense that perhaps I don't want to say that if they don't go with a Baynes Horford starting lineup, forget about the other 3, but the Baynes Horford piece of that against Philly, assuming all injury things are equal, if they don't go with that, then I think you're right. I think they're going to probably stick going small throughout. I can't imagine. You're not going to see the Philadelphia 76ers.
You think the 76ers game basically gives us total insight for the season on how they plan to approach it, because that matchup is the one where you would go with Baynes most. Now, the only thing I'm going to debunk that with just a little bit is it's opening night. And it's going to be really hard for them not to show off Hayward. It's going to be really hard for them not to put Tatum out there. So I'd say the next matchup that dictates might be a better little bit of look, just because, I mean, it's all over. It's the most important game to kick off the year, right?
Yeah, no, and they're absolutely right. I mean, there's a lot that's going to go into this. I think you look at, I think overall though, you look at where, against Toronto, okay, when you start looking a couple nights later, and they're going to play Toronto, I think that's in Toronto, that first game in Toronto. That game is one where, okay, that's probably going to be a night you're going to start whoever you're going to start. Yeah, you got Valanciunas, but Ibaka, if that's Tatum, okay, if it's Horford, you're not feeling like whoever you're playing is dictating the matchup. Whereas Philly, Embiid's a load, right? I mean, there's just no way around that. So you're right. We'll see where that goes. I think it's going to take probably a week or two for us to probably get a sense of like, okay, well, this is what it is, or this is definitively what it isn't,
I just like during the regular season going more with the offense. I think they should try to shoot their way out to start games and be able to get a little bit of a lead. That's a breather. That way they can get the younger players that asserted themselves last year, such as Terry Rozier, I think deserves minutes. Marcus Smart's going to be in his role, is going to be in his role. Somebody else who might get a little bit upset if they don't see the kind of minutes that they did last year would be like a Marcus Morris. He's the kind of guy you could almost see demanding a trade potentially if, he's under 10 minutes per game. So if they get out to those leads, they can bring in those bench players who desperately need those minutes and execute kind of that strategy. And that's kind of how the regular season goes. I don't want them to get lazy on defense, and that's not my point, but I do think that they should kind of let offense and having fun dictate the pace of the schedule. And then maybe when we hit March, the All-Star break, maybe right after that, in late February as we head down the stretch, maybe at that point they start to go with a little bit bigger lineups, start to be able to practice defense and that. And not that they wouldn't do it situationally and throughout the rest of the season, but I just mean in the starting scenario, how do they get out of the gate, maybe taking one of those offensive pieces out of the lineup to play defense at a more staunch level? Because you could see that in the postseason more than I would say most teams tend to play it during the regular season.
I guess we're going to have to see what their identity is. I think they're going to be better, but they also weren't like a great offensive team last year. Now, will they be great with healthy Kyrie and full Gordon Hayward, and Tatum has a sense of who the heck he is, and Jalen might be able to do a few more things other than hit spot up shots, and Rozier's feeling himself, and a little bit less Marcus Smart. Will all those things balance out to be, a top 5 super team? I mean, that's kind of the question, it seems like, is, are the Celtics a super team? Are they, I think the talent is at that level. The potential of that talent is at that level. But offensively, I'm not sure if, I'm not sure if that's where they're headed. I'm not sure if they can reach that. I mean, offensively, I think is where they have to make that jump.
Think about where they were maybe around the time that, I mean, there was that standard Celtics middle of the season kind of difficulty that they've typically gone through, where all of a sudden it happened with Isaiah Thomas 2 years in a row, where they're really just deferring to their primary scorer to be able to get it done for them. And I think this year, it'll be a little bit different, because after that stretch, when Kyrie finally went completely down, that's when we saw some of these younger players step up offensively. Even Jaylen Brown and his confidence level shooting the 3 ball in the second half of the season. I mean, he was there pretty much all season long, but I just think this year we're not going to have the same kind of problem with that offensively. Now, if you remember, after Hayward went down, they were one of the top defensive teams in the league going all the way through, I want to say mid to late December, but that's when it really began to fall off, was after that. Now, we know a lot of teams, it takes them a little while to get their offenses together and get defense. And so, that first 20 to 25 games, it could have been fool's gold with the way that they were playing defense. But I think they actually did play defense that well. I think they might not have been the number 1 or 2 defensive team in the league by the time it was all said and done, potentially. But I think health and the injuries is what wound up really catching up to them. So no, I don't expect them maybe at the very bottom of the top 10 in the league defensively, but I think offensively they take a big spike just because of how much progress the players coming off the bench have been. That was the biggest issue last season. They lost their number 2 scorer in Hayward, and the players off the bench really weren't quite ready until they were thrust into starting roles in regular minutes. And I guess that will be the biggest test, is how much can they handle coming in the game off the bench instead of coming right out and getting into the flow of it with significant minutes. That's kind of a veteran move, and we're asking a bunch of still players early in their career to be able to pull off.
Well, and you're also looking for guys, Terry Rozier is expecting a big paycheck at the end of this year. So that's a big issue. Like that's something that a guy who spent his summer looking sharp, looking good, all kinds of Instagram, stories, all kinds of Snapchat. The guy has been, extremely online, and he's been out there putting himself out there, and it's great. It's great. But, he's going to be coming into the season, and he's going to be the fourth guard. He's the fourth guard on this team. That's a pretty tough spot to going from starting point guard on the Eastern Conference finalist that was only a couple minutes away from being an NBA finalist to now you're the fourth guard. And that's, I think that's where Brad Stevens is going to make his money this year. It's not going to be trying to get the most out of a ragtag bunch of ruffians. It's going to be, no, you're all good, but I got to massage this ego over here, this ego over there. You got your time to shine over here. You're going to have to take a seat here and take a step back. Now it's your turn. Now that's well, I'm going to
tell you right now, that's exactly why I say they go with that offensive lineup to start the game, because it becomes, if they come out and light the world on fire 2 out of 3 nights and get that going, they'll be able to satisfy those egos a lot easier than getting into a defensive grinded out battle where they're not able to throw up the points that they need to be able to go deep into the bench. That's how you satisfy that. It's very much like in sales. In sales, everybody says revenue cures all problems. And it's true. If you bring in the money, then there's plenty of money to do what the business needs to do. But it's the same thing in this scenario for the Celtics, I believe. Different than Toronto. I don't think scoring is going to solve all the problems in Toronto. I think that's a defensive game plan across the board. They're going to need to find ways to score. They will. But for Boston, I feel like scoring solves all the problems that they have about feeding egos and getting guys minutes and taking nights off, because they've got to be the number 1 seed. They want that home court advantage in the postseason. I mean, with all those injuries, they were 1 game away from playing in the NBA Finals. And we'll debate this all season long as we actually see the team we thought we would see last year that's now matured from all these minutes coming for players that are going to be bench role players. Can they take them on? Can they take them on, John? The Warriors.
Oh, Warriors? If Boogie Cousins is the Boogie Cousins that we've become accustomed to with some sort of brain transplant, no. I mean, if Boogie's Boogie and they are, playing, and plays, if he fits seamlessly into what they do, no way.
So but I think you're looking for Cancer Cousins.
Cancer Cousins. Yeah, man, I need Cancer Cousins. I need him to go in there from the inside and completely make all of the vital organs of the Golden State Warriors turn to jelly. I mean, I think that's what we all need. No, look, I'm just saying, if he's his booginess, his best booginess in terms of game, less booginess in terms of mental, it's a wrap.
But that's always the
down.
thing. That's always the thing with him. But you're right. He's got some rehab to do, but we're not evaluating this until we're fully into the postseason and into the finals, and he'll be healthy by then. And how he integrates later, I think actually that's an advantage for them. I think if he was actually on the court all season long, there'd be plenty of time for that cancer cousins to fester and spread. Mm-hmm. But I think because he's going to be chomping at the bit when he finally gets to play, it's kind of a shortened season, and they'll figure out how to get him out there and make the best of it. I actually think it'll probably go very, very successfully. So I guess we'll see. The question will really come down to not just the Celtics defensively, like we were just kind of talking about with the starting five and how to get set up for the postseason, but also that whole offense to start the game. But they are going to need that. They're going to need to basically try to outshoot the Warriors, right? Like they're going to have to be able to put up, and that's going to be very tough, but they're going to have to be able to put up those same kind of points. So I'm going to go to something that Goodman said on that video from the practice facility on Celtics blog and CLNS media that we talked about earlier. And he said that Tatum, he believes, is the second option, which would put him ahead of Horford and Hayward. And I can understand ahead of Horford just because that's how Horford would have it. But ahead of Hayward kind of is surprising. And maybe he just meant to start the year because Hayward's going to be kind of getting himself going again. I have a hard time envisioning that we'll see Tatum being the number 2 option. I really think it's going to be Kyrie. It's going to be Hayward. Then it definitely goes to Tatum for me, Horford, and then, Jaylen Brown is kind of sitting in that 5 spot, which is actually a real advantage for him. If people are doubling anywhere else and sleeping, I can see Jaylen setting up in the corner and then instead of taking the corner 3, just coming right along baseline on that weak side and throwing down a dunk. I think they can do a lot of creative things offensively. But is Tatum really the number 2 option in your mind, John, all season long? I mean, I think he gets there, but is he with a healthy Gordon Hayward?
I think Jeff's reaching on that one. Look, I think Tatum has a real shot to be there. I think he has a real shot to be there by the end of the year. But I mean, Gordon Hayward is a multi-time All-Star, former third team. I mean, the guy can play, and I suppose you could say, well, he's slow, he's coming back, and in that time, Tatum has been on a steady progression, but that's just I think it's just kind of silly to me. I think Tatum has got to prove it. Like that's where we are right now with Tatum and Brown. They're both in the prove it stage. Like they have potential to be something. But at this point, they need to prove it. They need to go out there on the court and take it. Like this whole thing about, like the rank and the SI rank and all these different things talking about how good they could be, what their 2K rank is, it doesn't matter. Like it's all just talk, right? At this point, they got to go out there and do it. And I'm just I understand what Goodman's saying and Tatum has that ability, but and
depending on what he's been doing in the offseason,
the guy. Let's not anoint him.
I agree. We don't anoint him. I think the only question mark is because Hayward hasn't been there, but I think everybody will remember what kind of a shooter Hayward is when he comes back. And not that Tatum isn't a lights out shooter and didn't show us some crazy awesome stuff in his freshman year. I mean, that whole rookie endeavor was pretty awesome, and it was born out of injury that he had such an opportunity to showcase himself. But and I do think he'll get better with more attention drawn other places. But whether we see or the Celtics see Tatum as the number 2 option, I guarantee you, when opposing teams are game planning for the Celtics, they're game planning as Hayward is the second option, not Tatum, and they're just trying to make sure they don't get burned by Tatum as a result.
Well, and to that point, right? So let's go back to the Evan Turner era, right? Evan Turner is a playmaker. Like that was what he was good at. That doesn't mean just because he wasn't this dynamic scorer, he was the guy you go to get the bucket, whether he's the one that created it in ISO or whether he created a shot for somebody else. That's what we're talking about with Hayward. We're not talking about this, this otherworldly guy who can call upon the gods to give him this sainted shot. Like that's Tatum, and that's okay. Hayward right now is smarter. He's stronger. He's more prepared to get an NBA bucket. Now, do I trust Tatum to be able to go there? Yeah, I do. But do I think that Hayward is in a better spot where in his career and probably into the context of what the Boston Celtics are doing? Yeah. So I've still put Hayward ahead of him, but there's nothing wrong with saying that, and there's nothing wrong with saying Tatum isn't there yet. But could he be by the end of the year? No doubt. No doubt about it.
I really look at it like, all right, if the ball isn't, Kyrie's number one, the game's on the line, you've got one shot left, Kyrie's your first option. Who's it going to go next? Is it going to go to Tatum or is it going to go to Hayward? And I just think right now, and I get it, it's going to depend. It's going to depend on the play. It's going to depend on who's open.
Right.
All of that, right? But I'm just saying the majority of the time, if Kyrie doesn't have a shot, he's being doubled, they did a great job, whatever, the ball is next going to go to, or there's going to be more plays run and designed around the ball going to finish that sentence. It's Hayward, right? 6 ways till Sunday. The more experienced player, the veteran, he's got the outside shot.
Right.
You know, not saying that Tatum won't get the chance at that. And maybe it's even 60-40.
Right.
And maybe it's approaching 51-49 and nobody can actually tell the difference about who's number two, right? But I just think at this point, Hayward is number two. And I love Tatum, so that says a lot.
Yeah, no, and I think that's very fair. And that, look at the way Brad draws things up, right? He's going to go to whoever it's open. It may be whoever you're guarding, not who you are. You know what I mean? So it's a bit of a fictitious argument. I think the most important point is that the Celtics have three guys that can get buckets at perhaps whenever they want. And I think that's really the important piece of this, whether, whoever you go to. And I think, the ideal world to me is Hayward gets the ball and he's got a great shooter in Kyrie. He's got a great shooter in Jason Tatum, and the defense can't help off either one. And he can also go to Horford if help comes from there. And you know what? If help comes from Jaylen Brown, Jaylen can make him pay. I mean, that's the devastating part of this. We saw what a strong catch and shoot opportunity Jaylen Brown became last year. If he goes another level in that, whoa boy.
And once again, you are making my point about why I go with the smaller starting five. And I know you seem like you're softening. But we'll see how this goes as we get closer to the start of the season. Nope. You've been much more, I want to say, wily in defending your Baynes will start position than this
Baynes will start.
Baynes will start. You're coming around. I can see it. By the way, I was just noticing after watching the CLNS media video of Jeff Goodman standing next to Trags and Nick that there's a similar or somewhat resemblance between, not exactly, but you and Jon have kind of a Jon. See, there we go. You and Jeff have a little bit of a slight resemblance. So maybe you could be like evil Jeff and we could get you to a game like once this year and you just wear, a patterned sports coat. You're tall like Jeff, right? Two of you are probably what? You're 6'5", 6'3"?
Oh God, no. 6'2".
6'2". All right. I think he's like 6'4". Either way, you could be evil Jeff, right? You could just be like,
I like Rondo.
Yeah, exactly.
I like Isaiah.
You just do the opposite of everything. You know what I mean? We just get you side by side, and you're like,
I got brown hair. Yeah. I see it. Okay, all right.
It's there, dude. I'm telling you.
All right. My brother from another mother, Jeff Goodman. All right. Well, there you go.
I'm telling you. All right. Last thing we're going to talk about before we wrap the show is a very disappointing situation with a player who showed some flashes late last season, got some, I would say a few critical minutes in the postseason, but really an explosive athlete taken in the second round and somebody that I was like, whoa, this guy is 6'6" and an athletic freak and actually can shoot the ball. And I thought to myself, this might be one of those players that the Celtics stole out of the second round. And it just tells you why, hey, the more second round picks, the better, because eventually you're going to hit on one of them. I thought this was the guy. And he also happens to have the namesake of one of the most famous Celtics players in history, right, Jon? So Jabari Bird then goes out and just has a nightmare night. And I just think his I know they haven't done anything yet, but it's hard for me to see the Celtics hanging on to him. Maybe they'll wait till there's some sort of a court determination before they make it official. Maybe they'll wait until they see, all right, we need a spot on the roster and we've got somebody we like, and now we're going to do this. Whatever the case may be, it's just hard for me to see him sticking around.
Yeah, it's tragic. I mean, it's tragic on a lot of levels, and you feel for the victim here. You feel for what she's going through. I mean, this is, this is a nightmare on so many different levels.
Well, and it's public too, right? Like that's not somebody would, regardless of being the victim. I don't think it's something that anybody would want to be public. That it occurred, because that's just a whole other host of trauma that somebody shouldn't have to deal with.
Right.
And I think that's often forgotten, with some of these people that are more visible athletes in the media. There's a secondary sort of victimization that happens there.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you're a fan of the person, and so of the assailant, I guess, in this case, and that fandom is now going beyond the court and into someone's home life, and it's just
and your name is out there too. Like
Absolutely.
Everybody knows you're
Yeah.
the victim versus sort of being able to kind of control that and only have that be known to the people that you would select to have your private matters known to. So anyway, I mean, we don't need to. It's obviously not a show, but I just think it bears mentioning. Like it's very unfortunate, and there's a lot of reasons why you should feel for the victim in this case.
Absolutely. But one thing that I don't want to say about a rush to judgment, I think that's probably too strong. And certainly there's been a report. There's been, he's been in court. He's free on bail. There is a piece of this which involves the mental health piece, and there's some unanswered questions still. We have the police report. We've seen that. But we don't know why he was in the hospital for several days, a good part of a week. We don't know why it says in the report that he was convulsing. He has anxiety. We don't know. There's a lot we don't know about his side of this. We know what happened. We know it was alleged to have happened, but we don't know what is going on with Jabari Bird. And, after this summer, we read so many great stories that Jackie McMullen wrote about the league and things we thought we know about players. But then when you saw their side and what they're going through, you did say, whoa, okay, well then I look at that situation perhaps differently. I'm not saying that's the case here, but we are hearing this from a perspective. I'm sure through court and through other things, we'll see a broader scope here. So if the league this is in the league's hands, it's not the Celtics' decision. So the league needs to make some decisions here, but also we need to figure out there could be something that has to do with the mental health piece of this. And we've seen that through those articles, the league hasn't done a great job. They've done some things. The Celtics have been very forthcoming in trying to help their players. Marcus Morris, Shane Larkin, two of those guys mentioned in those articles by Jackie Mack. But this is a whole nother thing. This is where one of their players went out, did something likely very, very awful, assaulted someone, kidnapped someone, strangled someone. And this is a big test for what this means potentially on the mental health side. If there's an argument that was some of what caused this, and we don't know anything, again, I just think so much about those articles and what we thought we knew about players, what we now know about players. I just feel like we have to probably pause a little bit and maybe take a step back.
I think back to Delonte West when he was on,
Exactly.
the Spider with a whole bunch of guns and he was having, a complete manic episode. The problem is, at least in that scenario, it's very hard to relate to this one because there was no victim in that scenario. But
Absolutely.
if Delonte had gone and shot somebody or shot the police officer who was trying to detain him,
Sure.
and believe me, I have a background, and having worked with mental health, but once there's a victim, the game is changed. And regardless of the illness. And so I guess on the one hand, there's, legally what needs to happen. And then secondarily, there's what the league needs to do. So, if there's a legitimate psychological sort of underlying issue here, then maybe he doesn't lose his job, but he likely still goes to jail, right? It's that,
Right.
That's where you tease it out to say, okay, ultimately he loses the job if he goes to jail, right? Because he's incarcerated. But the point being that, for somebody with mental illness, it's not really the employer's decision. You know what I mean? Like in that scenario, like totally. to levy, any kind of discipline where, legally once there's a victim, there still does need to be levied, some level of punishment. And maybe that's getting help in a psychiatric facility instead of being incarcerated, but you kind of leave those matters up to the law. And there is a lot to learn about psychiatric illness. And I think, the stigma and all that is very real, but I always think of that Delonte West situation, which maybe many of our listeners won't even know who Delonte West is anymore, unless they're, very keen on the LeBron James and his mom scenario. But Delonte was a player I really loved. I mean, I really enjoyed him as a Celtic. If you remember, he came out of St. Joe's with Jameer Nelson, who's, had a pretty decent career. And I think he was in the same draft class as Tony Allen.
Mm-hmm. And Al Jefferson as well. Yeah, he was really there for the start of the whole thing as it turned around, that 04 situation. And he was great, and you're right. I mean, the case of a victim here does change how you look at it. You want to see these guys get help. There are people who've been victimized, who have had wrongs done to them. And so the court system has to deal with them. I just, I look at this and it's perhaps I'm mixing things that aren't related, but we do such a poor job in this country of dealing with mental health and dealing with people who have illnesses. I mean, look at all the well, I won't get on the soapbox because this is Celtics Stuff Live, but right. I think the point is that it's just very easy for us to jump to conclusions about, everyone's got all these things and they've got the money and they've got the fame and they've got the fortune. And reading those articles that Jackie and ESPN put out really, caused me to really rethink a lot of that.
Illuminated some stuff, right?
Yeah. And you've got to think about, these people are real people. They're not just, players. They're people who have all the same problems we all have, perhaps even more given their upbringings. And so I'm not saying that's the case here in Jabari Bird's case, but I don't know that we've built a good enough
we don't know the facts. Let's just be real. We don't know the facts in any situation.
That's
and
right.
Even when they come out in the papers and they come out, we still don't know the facts.
Yeah, that's true.
We still weren't there. And it's so easy to do this Monday morning quarterbacking of everybody else's life. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying that we necessarily make these things okay. You know what I mean? And not about that. The point is, we don't know the facts. We have even more limited information today than we will when finally, this is dealt with legally. And even then we won't still know the entire story. We'll only know the story as it was told by the lawyers. And so that's just the truth of the matter. And even with mental illness, it's not like you just go and draw some blood and say, oh, okay, it's this. And this is exactly how it presents itself, Yeah. It's not a perfect science. And even science, as great as the scientific method is, there is no, I think, such thing as perfect science, right? There's just more and more details that help paint a clearer picture and a more accurate picture as time goes on. So
yeah, good point.
I don't know, John, maybe we wrap it on that. And, but I am disappointed because I was a big fan of Jabari Bird. I think it's going to be hard for him to get through this and maintain an NBA career, even if it's not until after this contract ends, depending on how things go. It's just very tough to fight through that. So, and as you mentioned before, Terry Rozier was the fourth guard. So limited minutes available there, but I thought this was a player that, could back up the Jaylen Brown, Terry Rozier, when Terry does. Terry might even get the Brinks truck, right? Isaiah's been struggling to find his way there, but Terry could get some money this year after this season.
So.
If he plays well off the bench, he's due to make some cash.
I think he's going to make money, even if he, as a fourth guard, even if he's getting, 20 minutes a night, 15 minutes a night. I still think he showed so much in that playoff run that we've seen guys do far less and make far more. So I'm not worried about Terry Rozier cashing in big time next summer, whether it's here or whether it's somewhere else. I think the bigger question is where's Kyrie Irving going to be, and making sure he's on the Celtics and not somewhere else. By the way, this Jimmy Butler stuff, that bears a lot of watching, because I think if he goes, then there's a whole bunch of dominoes, and maybe he gets traded somewhere. What happens to Karl Anthony Towns? There's a lot of talk on Twitter this morning about, well, maybe Towns, they trade Towns, keep Butler because Tibbs likes him. I don't know. It's a lot of stuff to watch here before we get to training camp here in the next week.
You're 100% right about that. And we always know there's a trade around the corner whenever there's a roster crunch for the Celtics. So certainly something that bears keeping your eyes on throughout the entire season. And we're finally ramping up for it. Preseason just 11 days away, media day a week from today, at least when this airs. And then the regular season almost exactly, well, the regular season does begin a month from the day that Jon and I are recording this. You will all hear it tomorrow morning, but that is going to do it for this week. The broadcast will be available on demand on the CLNS Media mobile app. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter at CSL_Justin and at CSL_Duke. A heartfelt thank you to everybody for tuning in. And remember that you can help support the show by subscribing to Celtics Stuff Live on iTunes and Stitcher. We'd love it if you gave us a rating and a review, because your feedback is important to the show. And for staff writer Samuel Elias, executive producer Larry H. Russell, the founder of CLNS Media, Nick Gelso, and for my co-host Jon Duke, I'm Justin Poulin. Thank you for listening to this week's edition of Celtics Stuff Live.
Celtics Stuff Live.